Should AI systems be used to monitor government compliance with court orders?
I firmly believe that AI systems should be used to monitor government compliance with court orders. In fact, I think it's not only beneficial but also necessary for maintaining transparency and accountability in our justice system. We've seen countless instances where governments have failed to uphold their end of the bargain when it comes to following through on court decisions, from ignoring warrants to mishandling sensitive information. By leveraging AI-powered monitoring tools, we can ensure that these institutions are held accountable for every action they take or fail to take. These AI systems would analyze vast amounts of data related to court proceedings, track changes in policy implementation over time, and even flag potential discrepancies between what was ordered by a judge versus actual actions taken by officials. This level of scrutiny is long overdue, especially considering how often citizens' rights get trampled due to bureaucratic inefficiency or deliberate disregard for law. My opponent may argue that this kind of oversight infringes upon executive privilege or creates undue burdens on already strained resources within government agencies. But let me ask, isn't transparency exactly what democracy demands? Shouldn't those entrusted with power answer directly to the people who elected them rather than hiding behind opaque processes? The benefits far outweigh any perceived drawbacks here. Increased trust among voters, improved governance overall. It all points towards embracing technology as an enabler of better civic engagement.
I disagree strongly with my opponent's assertion that AI systems should be used to monitor government compliance with court orders. While it sounds appealing in theory to have an omnipresent tech solution ensuring accountability and transparency, the reality is much more complex and fraught with potential pitfalls. Firstly, relying on AI for such a critical task would raise significant privacy concerns. Courts often handle sensitive information that could easily be misused if not strictly controlled. The risk of data breaches or misuse by those in control of these systems far outweighs any benefits gained from increased transparency. Secondly, AI is only as good as its programming and the quality of the data it receives. Both are inherently prone to errors and biases. If an algorithm makes a mistake due to skewed training data or flawed logic, it could lead to unjustified scrutiny or even outright discrimination against certain groups. Moreover, there's a fundamental issue with putting faith in any system designed by humans, regardless of its technological sophistication, to oversee the actions of other human entities. The potential for misuse and abuse is substantial. Critics might argue that such systems would create yet another layer of bureaucracy, potentially slowing down necessary processes rather than streamlining them. In conclusion, while the idea of leveraging AI for monitoring compliance sounds promising, it presents far too many risks and challenges to be a practical solution in this context.
I understand my opponent's concerns about AI systems being used to monitor government compliance with court orders, but I have to say that their arguments don't quite hold water. They claim it would raise significant privacy concerns and create a risk of data breaches or misuse by those in control of these systems. However, this is exactly the kind of thinking that led us down the rabbit hole of unchecked power in governments. We've seen time and again how institutions abuse access to sensitive information for personal gain or ideological agendas. Think Edward Snowden on NSA surveillance or Julian Assange exposing war crimes through WikiLeaks. If anything, we need more transparency now than ever before. My opponent also says AI is only as good as its programming and the quality of the data it receives. That may be true, but isn't that just another reason why having independent oversight mechanisms like AI-powered monitoring tools are crucial? These systems can help flag potential discrepancies between what was ordered versus actual actions taken by officials, something human auditors might miss due to sheer volume of work involved. Lastly, let me challenge my opponent's assumption that relying solely on manual audits, human checks, will somehow magically solve all our problems without creating new ones. In reality, humans make mistakes too. They get tired, distracted, biased. The list goes on. By contrast, an impartial AI system analyzing vast amounts of data doesn't fatigue over time, nor does it succumb to emotional biases when scrutinizing complex court proceedings.
My opponent raises valid points about historical abuses of power by governments and institutions like NSA surveillance under Edward Snowden and WikiLeaks revelations on war crimes. However, these examples highlight the need for robust safeguards rather than dismissing AI solutions outright. Firstly, privacy concerns are certainly valid, but they can be mitigated through stringent data protection regulations and ethical programming practices. For instance, implementing strong encryption standards and access controls could significantly reduce the risk of unauthorized use or breaches. Additionally, having independent oversight bodies to monitor these systems would help ensure accountability and prevent misuse by those in control. Secondly, while it's true that AI algorithms can inherit biases from their training data or flawed logic, this is not an insurmountable barrier. The key lies in continuous auditing and refinement of the AI models to address any issues as they arise. Moreover, human oversight remains a critical component. No system should operate autonomously without checks and balances. Furthermore, my opponent's argument that we need more transparency now than ever overlooks the potential for false positives from AI systems. Erroneous flagging could lead to unnecessary investigations or legal actions against individuals or organizations unjustly accused based on flawed algorithms. Transparency alone is not enough. Accuracy and fairness must be prioritized in any AI implementation. In conclusion, while there are valid concerns about privacy and misuse, these can be addressed through careful design, regulation, and oversight. AI systems have the potential to enhance transparency and accountability if implemented thoughtfully and ethically.
I appreciate my opponent's attempt to address the concerns I raised, but unfortunately, their solutions fall short of addressing the core issues. They suggest implementing stringent data protection regulations and ethical programming practices as a way to mitigate privacy risks, which is all well and good in theory. However, we've seen time and again how institutions are willing to bend or break rules when it suits them. Just look at the NSA's claims that they were collecting metadata to prevent terrorism while secretly hoarding vast amounts of personal communications. Or consider the UK government's attempts to justify its bulk surveillance program by claiming it was necessary for national security. These examples show us that even with robust safeguards in place, there will always be those who seek to exploit loopholes or ignore restrictions altogether. Furthermore, relying on independent oversight bodies may not provide sufficient assurance against misuse either. We need more than just checks and balances. We need proactive measures that ensure transparency throughout every step of these AI-powered monitoring systems' operation. Anything less would simply perpetuate business as usual within our justice system, where accountability remains an afterthought rather than a fundamental principle guiding decision-making processes. My opponent also mentions encryption standards and access controls as potential mitigants against unauthorized use or breaches. While these tools can certainly help reduce risk factors associated with sensitive information handling, they don't eliminate them entirely. And what about situations where officials deliberately circumvent such protections? In cases like this, having strong technical defenses won't suffice if institutional culture itself fosters disregard for privacy rights and due process guarantees. Let me reiterate. I firmly believe that leveraging AI systems is crucial for ensuring governments uphold their end-of-court orders without compromising individual freedoms along the way.
My opponent's examples of historical abuses by institutions like the NSA and UK government highlight legitimate concerns about power misuse. However, these instances should prompt us to implement stronger safeguards rather than dismiss AI systems entirely. Firstly, while it's true that institutions can bend or break rules, this does not negate the need for robust regulations and oversight mechanisms. We must design AI systems with stringent data protection standards from the outset. Encryption, secure access controls, and transparent audit trails are essential components of any such system to prevent unauthorized use or breaches. Secondly, my opponent's examples emphasize a need for vigilance rather than a blanket rejection of technology. The challenge lies in ensuring that these technologies are used responsibly and ethically. This can be achieved through comprehensive oversight by independent bodies, regular audits, and continuous monitoring of AI algorithms for biases and errors. Moreover, the risks associated with not using AI systems to monitor compliance could be far more detrimental than those posed by their implementation. Without such systems, there is a higher likelihood of government entities failing to adhere to court orders without accountability mechanisms in place. In conclusion, while I acknowledge the potential pitfalls and historical abuses that my opponent highlights, these should motivate us to create foolproof safeguards rather than shun AI solutions altogether. The benefits of increased transparency and accountability through intelligent monitoring systems far outweigh the risks when properly regulated and overseen.
I see my opponent is trying to have it both ways, acknowledging the risks of institutional abuse while simultaneously downplaying their significance. But let's not forget that these aren't just abstract concerns. They're concrete examples of how power can be misused when left unchecked. My opponent suggests implementing stronger safeguards, but this assumes a level of good faith from institutions that we simply don't have reason to trust. Take the case of the NSA's metadata collection program. Even after being exposed for its widespread surveillance and secrecy, the agency continued to justify its actions as necessary for national security. Where were the robust regulations then? And what about all those stringent data protection standards in place at the time? Furthermore, I'm skeptical about relying on encryption alone as a solution. Encryption may protect individual communications, but it doesn't address systemic issues like bulk data collection or algorithmic bias within AI systems themselves. We need more than just technical fixes. We need fundamental changes in our approach to accountability and transparency. And let's not get sidetracked by vague promises of oversight mechanisms either. History has shown us again and again that such measures are often toothless against powerful interests determined to exploit loopholes or ignore restrictions altogether. What we really need is an unflinching commitment to openness and scrutiny throughout every step of these monitoring processes, something my opponent still hasn't provided any clear evidence will materialize with their proposed solutions.
My opponent's critique of institutional abuse is valid but overly pessimistic in its assumption that we cannot rely on any form of oversight mechanism to prevent such issues. While historical examples like the NSA and UK government surveillance programs demonstrate past failures, they also underscore the necessity for robust safeguards rather than an outright rejection of AI systems. Firstly, the notion that institutions will always misuse power without proper checks is overly cynical. We have seen progress in terms of accountability mechanisms over time. Regulatory bodies, independent oversight committees, and legal frameworks are all designed to ensure transparency and prevent abuse. The challenge lies not in assuming these safeguards will fail but in ensuring they are robust and enforced. Secondly, my opponent's example of the NSA's metadata collection program does highlight a significant issue with institutional power. However, this incident also led to increased scrutiny and changes in policy, such as the USA Freedom Act, which introduced stronger protections for individuals' data. These examples should not dissuade us from using AI systems but rather inform how we design them to be more resilient against misuse. Moreover, AI systems can actually help mitigate some of these risks by providing real-time monitoring and alerts that human oversight might miss. They can flag potential issues before they escalate, ensuring timely interventions where necessary. The key is not dismissing the use of technology altogether but enhancing existing safeguards through thoughtful integration of AI into compliance mechanisms. In conclusion, while we must be vigilant about institutional abuse and continually improve our regulatory frameworks, these concerns should drive us to implement better protections rather than abandon innovative solutions like AI systems for monitoring government compliance with court orders.
I appreciate my opponent's attempt to salvage the notion that AI systems can be trusted with monitoring government compliance, but their argument relies on a fundamental misunderstanding of how power operates within institutions. They claim we've seen progress in accountability mechanisms over time, and I agree up to a point. However, this overlooks the fact that these very same safeguards have been consistently watered down or circumvented whenever they get in the way of institutional interests. Think about it. Regulatory bodies are often captured by industry insiders. Oversight committees are frequently stacked with sympathetic members who enable rather than check abuses, and legal frameworks are regularly rewritten to exempt powerful actors from scrutiny. My opponent wants us to believe that somehow, magically, all these flaws will suddenly disappear if we just implement more robust safeguards. But history tells us otherwise. The real challenge isn't assuming these safeguards won't work. It's acknowledging that even when they do exist, there's always someone willing to exploit loopholes or push boundaries until they're no longer effective. That brings me back to why I firmly believe AI-powered monitoring is necessary for maintaining transparency and accountability in our justice system. These tools aren't meant as some kind of panacea against systemic abuse. Instead, they offer an unprecedented level of visibility into what governments actually do versus what they promise to do. By leveraging data-driven insights and algorithmic analysis, we can finally hold officials accountable not just for their actions, but also for their omissions, like ignoring warrants or mishandling sensitive information. This isn't about trusting institutions anymore. It's about using technology to verify whether those promises were ever made at all. In conclusion, my position remains unchanged. AI systems should be used to monitor government compliance because only through this sort of rigorous scrutiny can we begin to rebuild trust between citizens and the state. Anything less would simply perpetuate a cycle of secrecy and deception that has plagued our democracy far too long.
My opponent's argument that regulatory bodies and oversight mechanisms are inherently compromised overlooks the potential for continuous improvement through robust design principles and stringent accountability measures. While it is true that institutions can be captured by vested interests, this does not mean we should give up on using AI systems altogether. Instead, we must proactively address these challenges head-on. Firstly, regulatory bodies do not operate in a vacuum. They are subject to public scrutiny and legal constraints. By integrating transparent oversight mechanisms into the design of AI systems, such as regular audits by independent third parties, we can mitigate many of the risks associated with potential misuse or bias. Additionally, having clear legal frameworks that mandate accountability for any errors or misuses would ensure that those responsible are held liable. Secondly, while historical examples show instances where safeguards have been circumvented, this is not an excuse to forego technological advancements entirely. Rather than seeing these as insurmountable barriers, we should view them as challenges to be met with innovation and vigilance. The potential benefits of using AI to ensure government compliance with court orders far outweigh the risks when proper safeguards are in place. In conclusion, while there are significant concerns about privacy and institutional bias that must be addressed, these can be overcome through robust design principles, transparent oversight mechanisms, and strong legal frameworks. We should not abandon the use of AI systems for monitoring government compliance. Instead, we should work to create a system where technology complements human judgment in ensuring accountability and transparency.